to say only sexuality is it's not enough. And Eros can just be like so much more. It really is the life force running through everything. And so when I'm lucky enough to be near the ocean and I can, string my fingers through the eel grass and it feels very sensual in between my fingers, that's Eros. And I think we all can, and we can support each other to have access to that kind of connection.
Hey, curious people, you're listening to the Self-Led in Bed podcast, where we explore our fascinating internal sexual landscapes and discover our authentic sexual selves. I'm your host, Patricia Rich, a certified internal family systems and sex therapist, coach, and creator of the Self-Led Sexuality model for healing, pleasure, and empowerment. I've spent the last 30 years helping people to develop fulfilling relationships with themselves and others. If you're ready for some warm, smart, and juicy conversations, me and my parts invite you and your parts to get cozy and settle in. On today's episode, I had a great conversation with Suzanne Blackburn, a queer pleasure activist, sea kayak instructor, a badass elder, and fierce advocate for erotic inclusiveness, reclamation, celebration, and expansiveness. As someone who had her own embodiment taken from her early in life, she found her way back home to her body and her sense of self and sensuality through a program at the Body Electric School. She's been involved with the school ever since, and for more than 25 years has worn many hats there, including board chair and workshop facilitator. She has a deep passion for reuniting the erotic and the sacred, and her vision is to reach more and more people so they may reclaim their essential Eros and life force energy. Suzanne is the author of Reclaiming Eros, Sacred Whores and Healers, which gives us an intimate look into the evolution and motivation of healers who work with the power of pleasure and erotic energy. I invite you to notice what arises in your body and your internal system as you join us for this chat. Hi, Suzanne.
Hey, Patricia.
Welcome to the Self-Led in Bed podcast. I am so grateful for you being willing to share your wisdom with us here as a pleasure activist and someone who has just such a wealth of experience on these topics I've been wanting to explore. But before we go any further, I just wanted to give you a chance to say a bit about where you're located in the world.
Love to. First of all, thanks for having me. This is fun. It's exciting. I am in Portland, Maine. This is Wabanaki Confederation territory. And I like to remind people that we are the original Portland. The default is always Oregon. In fact, my sister accidentally booked a plane ticket to Oregon.
Oh,
So
gee.
anyway,
All right. And are there any aspects of your identity you'd like to share with listeners?
well, yeah, I am. My first part of my identity is as a mom and a grandmother, and very excited about that part of my life, my family, my partner. I have had a number of occupations, everything from being a commercial beekeeper to a massage therapist. Now I'm a sea kayak coach and guide, as well as a queer pleasure activist, primarily with the Body Electric School, but also just daily in and out of my life. It's just really who I am.
So that gives us a chance to jump right in. Although I did want to ask also what parts you might notice as we're getting started, but I want to pick up on the pleasure activist piece.
Okay. Yeah, either way, we can bring parts
Mhm.
in as we go.
Yeah. So I guess stepping in here, just, inviting you to check in and just see if there's anything you're noticing in or around your body or any,
Mm.
just anything showing up about stepping into this conversation.
I appreciate that so much. Usually, an interview or a conversation or something, nobody would even take that time. So that's lovely. since I am all about embodiment and being at home in my body, yeah, I'm noticing kind of almost like a vase shape in my chest, sort of down into my solar plexus of a little extra activation, like somebody put some Perrier in my system and it's hanging out in that vase. Yeah.
Love that. Some
Yeah.
bubbly in there, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It's good. It's a good feeling. It's just kind of
yeah.
noticing a little bit of a here we go.
Yeah. Gosh, and I'm noticing with you dropping in like that, it helps me slow down a bit too. It's been a day, it's been a week, lots of things going on, and it's funny because I feel like I'm in my body, but then I'm not always as in my body as I think. And sometimes it's that resonance, like I could feel you drop in, and then I sort of noticed myself just wanting to take a deeper exhale and settling in a little bit more.
That deep breath is so important. I've often mused and thought, what would it be like if our political leaders, like before they get into a debate or before they vote on a bill or propose something, how would it be if they just all spent maybe 3 minutes breathing and grounding and
Mm.
slowing down enough? And oh, heaven forbid, maybe they should give each other gratitudes. I mean, it would be a wildly different world.
It would be, yeah, my parts were listening to you say that and say, well, that would be a different world we'd be living in for them to do that, let alone whatever could result from that. So that might take us to this idea of being a pleasure activist. And I'm curious what that means to you. And it does already bring in this larger systemic piece, right? Because we wouldn't need to be activists if there weren't something, to react to, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really important thing to notice. Yeah, it's interesting is when I stop and really think about it. I mean, I've identified myself as a pleasure activist, as a queer pleasure activist. That just seems to be the description or the coloring that fits best. And I think about like, it's such a simple thing, this idea that pleasure is available to us, that it is healthy, that it is good and sacred and should not be disparaged or tarnished or denied in any way. I mean, that's such a simple concept. And yet it's just so hard to say it in our normal culture, our normal walkabout world. Like if I just, meet up with a friend and just would sit down to coffee, unless they know me well, because most of my friends do know what I do and who I am. But if I'm just meeting somebody and I say, hey, how's your pleasure life going? That would just be, but why is it so strange? Why is it so difficult? It just kind of baffles me. It could be so simple. It could
Mm.
really be so simple.
It makes me think about how, au contraire to that, we often start with our pain.
Yes.
And it feels like it's easier to join in a way, or it doesn't feel as vulnerable to share, oh my God, you wouldn't believe what happened, or this bad thing, or that bad thing. And there's almost a feeling of it feeling like bragging or something to talk about pleasure. Like some of my parts are saying, yeah, like it feels like, what if the other person had a bad day and I'm talking about pleasure? Would that make them feel bad? Like, there's so many different social inhibitions around that.
It's a really good point. We do seem to be hardwired to the negative, and maybe there's good reason for that. Maybe it's a survival thing. Maybe, if I'm sitting by the stream, sort of enjoying the soft feel of the water on my toes, I'm not paying attention to the potential saber-toothed tiger. Whereas if my friend is sitting there going, oh my God, you know, that person, I don't know. I don't know. We're definitely
Mhm.
hardwired to that. I think it might have been you who said to me one time, if you name a workshop something about healing trauma, you'll get a wait list. But if you name a workshop something about erotic pleasure, you got to like pull in enough to get it to go, right?
Yeah, I think it was. Yep.
Very
And
strange.
yeah, and that might be an opportunity to share that I've known you for about 3 years now and have learned so much and see you as a mentor as well as
Mm,
and just inspiring person and
thank you.
just appreciating that history as we step in even further. And I have something you said, since you just said something I said.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go. You can deny it. I'm convinced that external suppression and degradation of our bodies, our sexuality, and our pleasure robs us of our full potential. When we claim our embodied autonomy and inherent right to pleasure, we claim our power.
I won't deny it. I said it, I even wrote it. Yes, I think that's so true. I
Mhm.
think we walk around, let's start with basics. We are in bodies. We are biological creatures. Yeah, I mean, yes, there are many facets to being a human, but that one is pretty universal. And it seems like the powers of culture, of institution, of education, of church, of parents, of politicians, like all of those institutions would maybe not, I don't know if deny is the right word, but it's probably close to something like that, would do work to keep us from that truth and do work to keep us from that full potential. And I can only suspect that it's all a big conspiracy to rob us of the power that brings us, that full body, full potential, full aliveness. Like, oh my gosh, what if we were fully autonomous and celebratory and joyful in these bodies that we have?
Yeah,
It could
it
be
is a good
dangerous.
question, right? Like who would be endangered by that? And how does that protect power structures and capitalism? Not to get way heady into all the isms, but I just want to, it's always relevant, right? These larger systems, right? We don't buy as much stuff if we feel confident in our appearance, right? We don't feed the economy as much, right? If we're more content, we don't need as much. If we're more empowered, we're maybe going to be more, a little harder to control. Right.
Yes, 100%. That's really what I'm saying. I am a little tentative like you. I don't want to get like too much into that, sign carrying, flag waving, political. But that is the deal. That is the deal that without the discomfort and the shame and the desire to be something else that we hold for our bodies, there are billion, maybe $1 trillion industries that do not do very well. So that is a fact. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
Industries, churches, power structures. Yeah.
So this might, going from the macro, I wonder if we can kind of now go to the micro in the sense of the personal stories. And I'm just wondering, Suzanne, if you would want to share anything about your journey into this work, being a pleasure activist, and maybe a little more as we go about what that has looked like over the years.
Sure, that I would love to do that. So I'll set down my protest sign for a minute. And so I think it was in 1999. I was married. My husband had, I don't even know how he found out about it. He had found out about Body Electric and gone to a men's event. And I now understand why at the time I didn't. He came back and he was different. He was different. He was like lit up. It was like somebody, plugged him in and the lights were on inside. And he didn't tell me, he wouldn't tell me much about it. And I didn't really ask all that much. I was in a place in my life where I kind of knew two speeds. I knew work hard and work very hard. And I was just like head down doing what I needed to do. Not a lot of feeling or sensitivity or compassion going on inside for myself or for anybody else for that matter. But he was pretty persistent, and I finally gave in to his nagging and joined him to go to an all genders event, which at the time was called Two Spirits. So I went to this Two Spirit Body Electric School event in New York, a place called Livingston Manor. It's in the Catskills. And my whole world was turned upside down. I didn't really go looking for anything. I went because he insisted. I felt like I had armature, like I had a structure that my body was draped over, and that armature was reset at that event. And it's hard to explain exactly why and how. I remember in one exercise, standing there, and I'm not a person who cries easy. I was definitely not then. I'm a little bit easier with it now, but still comes hard sometimes. But I remember just the tears just rolling, like flooding down my face, no sounds. And the thought was, I'm lovable. That was the first time that I ever felt truly lovable or worthy of love. And I can't even tell you exactly why. Like, I can't draw the through line, like we did this and then we did this and then we did this. But as the structures are brilliant and maybe even inspired, and they do have a way of sort of midwifing the participants along so that they come into their own birthing process. And or some people might say their own homecoming.
I'm just wondering if you could just briefly say a bit more about what the Body Electric School is as you're telling your story, just because it might help listeners get a context.
Sure. Yeah, I went charging ahead there. So it's the Body Electric School, and it was started in 1984 by a man named Joseph Kramer in response to the ravaging AIDS crisis, the epidemic that was just decimating populations. And he was living in California, so it was particularly bad there. And Joseph had a background as a Jesuit priest and a massage therapist, which is kind of an interesting convergence of movement and spirituality. So his idea or his passion was to help bring men back together in a way where they could feel connected physically, pleasure physically, in a way that felt sacred and safe. So he developed a program where there would be no exchange of body fluids, because that was something that should not have been done during AIDS. And then it just kind of rolled from there and touched literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who came into this program and found their way back to sacred sexuality. And sacred sexuality is a term that we hear pretty often nowadays, but in 1984, it was a revolution. Shortly after that, some women folk, Isa Magdalena notably, Annie Sprinkle, eventually Stella Marta, and a few other folks said, hey, we know a little bit something about sexuality and the sacred being severed, and the experience of a person who's assigned female at birth, or AFAB. And they started some women's programs and some all genders programs out of that. So as I said, it was in 1999 when I finally got connected. Isa Magdalena was gone by then. She was the first woman teacher. And then she and I have connected since. She's a lovely person living in the Netherlands now. But yeah, so programs were starting to emerge for all genders and for women folk. Now we're a little bit more gender expansive. So when I say women, I'm talking about intersex people, I'm talking about non-binary women, I'm talking about transgender women. So we're, I think we're one of the most egalitarian and inclusive organizations around gender, so that all people are welcome. Yeah. Did that answer your
Yes,
question? I
it
kind of went.
did. No, it absolutely did. And so you got a little context here, and then to come back to your personal story. So your husband at the time had gone to a program, brought you to a program,
Mhm.
and then you had this profound healing experience. And it sounds like you continued from there.
I did. I was on fire. I had never felt so self-aware and at ease in myself. I feel like I've been living outside my body, or maybe at best, like I was watching a movie. It was me in the movie, but I was, separate from it. One of my mentors, Imaya, once said that all sickness is homesickness. And I think that's a really important thing to think about. So for me, it was like a homecoming to my body. I was like, welcome home. You're safe here. I hadn't felt safe there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would imagine that was for good reason.
It was for unfortunate reason. Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
not good reason, but for a
Yeah.
reason. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, yeah. That blessing of being at home in my body had been taken from me. So I had to find my way back. And when I did, as anybody could imagine, I was like, wow, I don't have to live like this. I don't have to be so estranged from myself and my own physical experience. And we went, I'm a person, I jump in with all fours. If I had six limbs, I'd jump in with all six. But we went immediately to another event in California, and it was there I heard Colin Brown, who owned the school at the time, say something about how they needed a coordinator in the Northeast. I didn't honestly even know what a coordinator was, but let's immediately, I'll do it. And I
And then you
did.
are off to the races.
Yes. Yeah. Been doing it ever since.
Yeah. Well, if we could just pause a moment here with you've just, touched on a lot here around coming home to your body and specifically in the context of sacred sexuality. And
Mhm.
this is something I've been passionate about for many years. And there's so many different avenues and traditions that have some element of embracing sexuality in a positive way and even the potential for healing and of course deep intimacy with other human beings. And I like to also emphasize intimacy with ourselves and perhaps a more larger sense of connection or erotic oneness, the sense of a spirituality or something larger, that can be accessed through
Yeah.
sexuality. And I think it's, like I said, there's many different avenues, but I'm a bit curious, how do you you started to talk about sacred sexuality. How do you maybe help people to discover that? Or just trying to think of how to put my question here. There's just some part of me wants to like just savor a bit this notion of the erotic power and of how healing and how sacred it can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a huge topic. I realize your podcast is it could be like the longest mini series to keep going, and hopefully through your work it will be. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Like, what is it as a body electric school facilitator? What is it I actually do? And I think the short answer is I create a hospitality, and in that hospitality, I serve platters of permission might be a good way to say, like an encouragement to be audacious enough to claim that you have the right to hold your body, to be in your body, to share your body or not, to regard your body in whatever way that it is your right to be with yourself in whatever way you choose. And nobody should be evaluating that or even asking you to do anything that is not 100% yours and your desires. The tricky part is, how do you know what that is? We have these huge histories of that opportunity for self-reflection being like so taboo. Like, how would we even dare? If I'm with a lover, in the old way of thinking about it, how dare I even say exactly what I want or tell that person exactly what I want? No, it's to be there to be in cooperative pleasure and, giving each other what we want. But I think that it's radical and radical in the sense of the root or the radical beginning of a plant it's radical to take time enough to decide what we really like and don't like and how we really want our bodies to be regarded by self and others, to be touched by self and others, to even be in the world as we connect with our living kin, with the rest of the creatures of the world. Yeah, I think that's the essence of it is a stage where you have permission to choose.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's hard.
That is hard. And this might be a good place to do a bridge into some of the IFS understandings here, right? Because we have this understanding that through our life experience from the youngest of ages, we have parts of ourselves that read the room and notice what we need to
Mm,
survive. We need to be fed, we need to be sheltered, we need warmth, we need human warmth and connection.
mm,
And our parts will take on jobs, roles, behaviors, attitudes to maximize our survival, right? And to um, navigate a complex environment, right? And so those might be our different kinds of parts that we have, our bodies, we learn to control, our functions, we learn what to let in, what to let out, how much, how little, all these things that are part of being socialized. And we need that all to happen. It's amazing that, from a baby's age, we can instinctively navigate all of that, right? But then over time, it can become something that is so rigid. I liked you use the word armature earlier, and I don't know if this resonates with your use of the word armature, but we create some sort of structure of how to function. And I think because sexuality is so infrequently addressed in a positive and healthy growth promoting way. Like we do this in other areas, but we might get more counterintelligence. You know what I mean? Like we might be able to talk more easily about the foods we eat or the exercise we do. Not that those aren't complicated often for people too, but so we basically have these structures. So we have parts that have beliefs, assumptions, roles they've taken on, burdens they've absorbed, and somehow our erotic energy is to sort of flow through the channel that's created there.
I'm so glad. Yeah, I love that description. It's so important. More and more I'm aware of the power structures that you're talking about and how when I enter a room, I'm quickly like computer AI scanning speed, scanning the room for power, right? Where's the power? Where do I belong? Who do I connect with? How do I hold my face? How do I hold my posture? Is this where I should be? Should I stay? Should I move in deeper? Like all of these things. And they're all like vestigial reactions to power structure to ensure survival. And it makes these things that we talk about, like choice and consent and autonomy and selfhood and all, it makes it really, really, really tricky. I think we tend to talk about things like consent in a way that doesn't really give gravity to how difficult that is to do. Because even if when I'm alone, if I can decide what I like and I don't like, if I would, dare to take that time with myself, which would be already a radical act, then when I'm encountering somebody else and there's a power differential or perceived power differential, it just makes I may or may not be able to take care of myself or to be as sure as I might be in another situation where the power differential is different. Did that make any sense?
It does, and it actually touches on what I refer to as internal consent.
Mm.
And of course, there's the interpersonal consent, right? So, okay, my mind is doing a big kaleidoscope of like a million things right now. So, because it sees all these interconnections with all these different things, right?
Should
So
we
I'm just
breathe?
gonna breathe and be in this kaleidoscope of connections for a minute.
Yeah.
Yes, because yes, I want to say these power structures still exist, right? So there's what we've internalized from a very young perspective. So often our protector parts are reacting to things that they encountered very young. So there could be some inaccurate information that our protector parts have about our current scenario, our current situation. But on the other hand, there's so many invisible oppressive forces in the current world that we sometimes, I think, blame ourselves for things we're having difficulty doing, like claiming our power. If I just, I mean, I'm just thinking about my gray hair, even, like how much it brought up to I was colored my hair for years and decided to grow that out. And people, some of that was my own psychological baggage, but there were different reactions. People would see me differently and react to me differently in the outer world. And that's sort of like a not as significant example as what a lot of people encounter. But like there's danger and risk to showing who we are sexually or in terms of our gender expression, etc. So it's not all outdated. I guess some of it's outdated information, some of it is not outdated information in terms of
Okay.
what we can express, what we can show to whom, and how resourced we are. If I'm depending on someone else to pay for to be, my bills and to be alive, and to take a stand is like a different proposition. Not that
Right.
it can't be
Right.
done. So in ways large and small, subtle and not subtle, this idea that we can know what we want and express it and be safe doing so and be expansive within that is much more complicated than it might seem in a little, self-help article or something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. A little sound bite from Me Too sound bite. Yeah. No, it's really, really important. And it doesn't mean that we can't and or don't persevere for what hopefully is a healthy relationship with our bodies and with desire and with pleasure and touch and self-love and love with others. We can persevere, but I think there are some keys to that, or some supporting tonics, if you will,
Mhm.
like just simply being aware and being conscious. Like when you and I are having a conversation, there's a power exchange here. There's like different identities, and just being aware of those is really, really helpful. It doesn't mean that we need to react any differently or not breathe into our own power, just to be aware. And then also I think programs like the workshops that you lead, or like the body electric school workshops, those events really help us take time out from our regular lives to practice that kind of self-empowerment, to flex those muscles of autonomy, and in experiences and exercises repeated and one that grows on the other, to get a chance to take a risk, to say, I want this, or this brings me pleasure and I don't want that. To take that risk in a controlled, safe, consensual environment, and to go, oh, hey, that felt really good. I I somebody was touching my back and I told them that didn't feel good to me. Stop. And I didn't blow up. I didn't disintegrate. I didn't get banished from the encampment or sent out on an ice floe. I'm going to survive another day. So yeah, so having areas to practice that and encouraging each other to practice it.
Yeah.
Having friends that you can talk to, like, this is what I did last night. I took up my power and it felt really great. And
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
didn't. Yeah.
And I love these examples because, some of these are, this is a sexuality podcast, right? So some of these things we're talking about with pleasure and consent are about specific and um, you know, things people might typically think of as sexual, right? Some, different sexual activities, different kinds of sexual touch. And also this larger idea of embodiment and pleasure and having our voice and setting boundaries is not limited, to any specific sexuality or sexual act, and really goes beyond the bedroom. That what and I feel like sometimes I have, and maybe it's in, as working in the therapeutic world, like I have to sort of make the case for pleasure and make the case that it matters and that it's healing. And that, so sometimes it's like, well, and often people have, and I have these parts too, very busy parts that have big jobs and important roles in life, and they feel like it's kind of not so, it's like a little cream puff over here if you want to
Mhm.
do something about pleasure. It's like a side nice little thing when you can afford it to take the time or whatever, but it's sort
Right.
of minimized, I think. And what I like in what you're saying and what I've read in your book, which maybe we can talk about too, is it's not a sidebar, right? That being connected to our own life force energy and the many ways it comes through us, is it's not a sidebar.
No,
It's the
no,
bar.
it's fundamental. It's really, really important. And what I've found in my own life and what I hear from other people is, because they have had this awakening or this sort of sea change to recognize that pleasure is really, really important, it feeds these other parts of their lives. Like people talk about suddenly being more creative or a more calm parent or more effective at work or even just more generous and loving in their everyday encounters. It's kind of like the underpinning or the foundation of a really healthy flow of energy. So the way I look at it is that when that eros or that pleasure is interrupted and it's blocked, then the rest of your life isn't getting as much nourishment as it might if you go ahead. And I hear people saying, like, oh, how can you do that? Like you said, it feels like frivolous. There are people who don't even have homes. And yeah, we definitely need to take care of that first. And people denying themselves the right to pleasure is not what fixes situations around the world. It's what fuels them and gives them the energy so that they can be more effective and more functional, more courageous.
Right.
Yeah, we're doing a workshop in New Mexico next. I think it's it's in September, called Erotic Nourishment, with that very focus of like, how do we feed and sustain ourselves? You know, not to the exclusion of other things, but in support of all other things.
Yeah, I love that. And um, I wanted to ask you, and you, well, maybe it was my gray hair example, but also I know that you've referenced being an elder in this work. And I just wonder if you could say a bit in terms of where you are now and the eldering process. And often people, older people are exiled culturally from being seen as sexual beings. And the idea of really being an activist for pleasure and sexuality. I don't know if you want to share your age or kind of how things may have evolved for you in that regard.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks. Okay, so in 5 days, I turned 75, and there is something quite captivating about rounding that three-quarter century mark, coming in the home stretch. But it's been something to be honest, I've really wrestled with. Like, is it okay for me to be a charged sexual being? The culture would say at this age or your but it's exactly who I am and I can't deny it. And so then I enter into spaces with people of all ages. I think at one, we had something like 7 decades represented at one of the events. So I have to ask, is it okay for me to be a sexually charged person when there are 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds and 50-year-olds in the room? And once again, I return to that knowledge that this is about me. I'm not inviting anybody to go to bed with me. I mean, that I do, but not in these spaces. Um, and and of course I can be and should be, and yay me to be that fully charged sexual being at any age at all. So that's definitely a factor. Sometimes reflect on the difference between the words elder and elderly. They have very, very different meanings. So yeah, I've kind of struggled. I feel like a kind of like a young at heart, and I look in the mirror and I go, wow, why me? I wasn't prepared for this.
Oh,
But I had a really nice experience. So last March, I went as a participant. It was the second time in 20 years. And for people who facilitate, I think it's really important to go as a participant now and then. So I went to an event in Georgia as a participant, and it was fantastic. It was so good for me. It was called Healing the Wounded Healer. And on the way home, I was in an airport, I was waiting, and I got a call from one of the facilitators. And she said she had a regret that she wanted to share with me. Would that be okay? Following forms of consent, which was awesome. And so I called back, left her a message, yes, please. And she said what she regretted was not holding an elder ceremony for me, because elderhood is something that can only be bestowed. In most traditions, it's not something you claim or take up, it's given to you. And I felt like that call was my elder ceremony. That was that was all I needed. And it was just lovely. So since then, I have begun to feel pretty comfortable as an elder in this work. And Of course, I don't think that that means that I have all the answers, but I do have a lot of life experience, and I'm happy to share all my mistakes with people as preventive medicine, perhaps. But yeah, I do feel now really, really comfortable as an elder in the world of reclaiming. Yeah,
Can I share what I heard my parts saying when you said, am I allowed to be this charged at 75?
sure.
Hell yeah. Oh
Gonna
my
get it. Hell yeah.
gosh. Hell yeah. And what an amazing role model and example. And I think this kind of aliveness, and I'm seeing you just, you radiate aliveness. And that's the best commercial, right? For this stuff.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, Patty, honestly, there's no stopping it, so I might as well just go with it. Yeah.
And
Once I'm on fire, I'm on fire.
and I also want to really honor the variations in people's journeys and their biologies, right? Because for some people, they never really have a strong feeling of sexual charge that
Mm,
comes naturally. And sometimes that might be due to burdens and, difficult experiences. And sometimes it's just a different body that
yeah,
responds differently to, sexuality or to different kinds of pleasure. So I kind of want to, I don't ever want to hold up one way of being an elder or anyone as like the way or the only way, but I think it's something to celebrate when there is passion and aliveness in your life.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really, really important point. And I think that's also why we need to broaden the idea of Eros. So people are often like, well, what is Eros? Is that sexual? Why don't we just say sexuality? And it's because Eros is just so much more. It's inclusive, certainly, of what we think of as sexuality usually, but that to say only sexuality is it's not enough. And Eros can just be like so much more. It really is the life force running through everything. And so when I'm lucky enough to be near the ocean and I can, string my fingers through the eel grass and it feels very sensual in between my fingers, that's Eros. And I think we all can, and we can support each other to have access to that kind of connection, pleasure, contact with life force.
So I'm sitting here with a book and it's called Reclaiming Eros.
What a fascinating title.
And it happens to be authored by you. And I highlighted something and would like to read it aloud on this
Okay.
topic because I think people do legitimately, question what is this word? It gets used in so many different ways. Eros. I did a
Mm,
workshop at the IFS conference a few years ago on erotic IFS and
cool.
different ways to explore Eros, but a lot of it I was having to define and sit with myself and say when it's one of those things that when you try to define it, it sort of can squish out a little bit.
Mercurial.
But you did a good job here in this part of your introduction. Erotic energy is the pulse, the animation, the life energy, the ever-present essential force in everything, including but not exclusively our genitals. This powerful force cannot be denied. It is relentless. It will, against all resistance, persist because the vitality of life depends on it. Erotic energy can be mutated and suppressed. It can be turned inside out so that its expression is pornographic, corrupt, or even violent, but it cannot be destroyed. That's powerful.
Wow, that's some good writing. Thank you.
There's another paragraph that I think I do want to read. My parts were like, should I read all of it? I think I do want to read the second part too. It is often through erotic energy, not exclusively experienced in connection with another person, that we experience our connection with the divine, our connection to the one, our oneness. It is when we bring our bodies together in erotic union or in direct connection with divinity that we are most in harmony with all of creation. To be human is to be erotic. To be erotic is to be alive. Whew.
Yeah, I stand by those words.
Whew,
Yeah,
gives me a
thank you.
little upsurge somehow. It's so
Yeah,
powerful and And I want to say when I talk about sexual self energy in the more in the parlance of IFS and
Mhm.
this idea that self energy, when it's embodied, our self energy to me aligns with this kind of energy that we're talking about, this life force energy. So, by many names, there's this essential energy of aliveness.
Yeah, for sure. And there are many, many paths, that talk about this energy. And I think what really keeps pushing me and what's really important to me personally is to keep noticing that it does include sexuality and it does include erotic pleasure. Because I think there are too many paths that sort of do an end run around that, as if that's base and not very highly spiritual, if you will, or whatever the words might be. But I want to go, hey, let's not forget this very, very important aspect of being a human, of being an embodied spirit. Let's not leave it out.
And you mentioned in that quote that it can be mutated and bent, right? And
Mhm.
so I think the other can happen too, right? This sort of life of the spirit can become devoid of sexuality, and then sexuality can become very profane and, used in a very consumptive way that
Yes,
is not
yes,
connected particularly with this kind of expansive energy we're talking about either. So,
100%. Yes, sadly,
and
sadly true.
it's a challenge, right? And so I appreciate the the challenge of that. How do we have some kinds of values or discipline or sense of our own center that allows
Mhm.
us to make conscious choices and we're not just run by our most hungry parts all the time,
Yeah,
but honoring our hungry parts and honoring our parts that maybe have additional concerns, whether those are around safety, safe sex, around committed relationships, around values, around health. There's so many different factors.
yes,
And I
yeah, for
think when
sure.
when self can get in the middle of it all, and this comes back to that internal consent piece too, like that when we're able to be centered within ourselves and really listen to all our different parts as well as we can and really hear all the different concerns, we can have the space to make choices.
Couldn't agree more. Absolutely. As of late, and I mean, like in the last 3 years or so, I've become a big fan of slowing down. It's been a, it's been an aspect of living that has escaped me for most of my life. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, yeah, there's beauty and value. It's very, very important to slow down, to become conscious, to actually feel what's going on and what these messages are. And it's really easy to just become numb or unaware or again disempowered, and then to allow that kind of degradation to happen, in a way that we're not conscious of. I don't know if I'm making a lot of bottom line is for me to become more aware and to be discerning. Slowing down has been very, very important. Slowing down and breathing. It's so simple. I feel like we've come full circle. Didn't we start out talking about that?
Yeah, in fact, we're coming full circle here as we're getting closer to the end, and it's always a good time to take a breath. So maybe our
Mhm.
listeners want to take a breath, maybe we want to take a breath and just see, kind of what remains to be said before we conclude here.
Yeah. That's the problem. I get going and we could talk for hours and hours.
Yeah.
You did ask me for a poem. Do you still want that? Would that be a
Oh,
good way to wrap
yes, I
this up?
forgot about that. Please.
Let me just pull this up. This is one of my favorites. It's one that I use a lot in my workshops. This is from a poet named Mark Nepo, and it's called Breaking Surface. Let no one keep you from your journey. No rabbi or priest, no mother who wants you to dig for treasures she misplaced. No father who won't let one life be enough. No lover who measures their worth by what you might give up. No voice that tells you in the night it can't be done. Let nothing dissuade you from seeing what you see. or feeling the winds that make you want to dance alone, or go where no one has yet to go. You are the only explorer, your heart, the unreadable compass, your soul, the shore of a promise too great to be ignored.
Beautiful.
Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful.
That feeds the pleasure activist in me.
Yeah.
That part. You got me speaking in parts now, Patty. It's
And we've only
infectious.
just begun.
I hope so. I hope there are many, many more encounters with you.
Same. So we will share some resources in the show notes, but do you want to speak out any particular resource or way for people to find you or the Body Electric School?
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty easy to find. It's suzanne@bodyelectric.org, and I'm facilitating, I think, 5 events this coming year. And there we have so many really gifted facilitators, people who are super passionate about the work. So I would just go to the website and browse around, see where you find curious interest. And if one of your listeners wants to talk more specifically about Body Electric, email me. I'm available. And I think it's pretty evident that I do love talking about this work, this important, beautiful, life-giving work.
That's great. And one last question. Well, you've already answered this. It's so interesting. Some people, we have not touched on the topic of pleasure the whole time. So I have a question at the end of what is something you find pleasurable in life? And we've
Mm.
already addressed it, but maybe just one more thing.
Trying to think what's bubbling up like right now.
Yeah.
Hmm. Well, we're the Northeast, we're rounding the corner, getting our first snowstorm tonight and tomorrow. And I've been looking back through some old pictures, and there's something in the motion of gliding in a natural environment, whether it's I'm a really avid sea kayaker, whether it's in my kayak or with cross-country skis across snow. There's something about that gliding motion that brings me a lot of pleasure. And I've started thinking about where else do I find that? Do I find that like in petting my cats or the skin, my own skin, or skin of my partner? So yeah, I think smooth gliding. So it gives me pleasure right now.
I'm noticing my shoulders sort of got a little bounce in them with that. It's so there the body keeps the score, right? Like the recognition of that sensation is kind of coming from the bottom up for me.
Yeah,
Love
yeah,
that. Well, thank
yeah.
you so much, Suzanne, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and that
Yeah.
connect again soon.
Thank you for this opportunity. It has been joyful. Thank you. It's been pleasurable.
Thank you for listening to the Self-Led in Bed podcast. Check us out at www.patriciarich.com/podcast, where you can sign up for a free guide to the 6 S's of sexual self-energy. And if you liked this episode, please subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time.